sky, watching the world pass us by.
Depeche to the world!
All right, so what's up, everybody? Welcome to Music Maniacs with Side After Dark.
We are back.
We're Side After Dark. I'm Dan Berg.
I'm Steve Graffiti.
So we are talking about a band today that is definitely one of the most influential bands of the 1980s.
Absolutely.
And going into the 90s, and obviously we'll talk about that. If you can't tell who it is, there is a hint. And it may be on my body right now, but we'll talk about that later. So we're talking about Depeche Mode, right?
Yeah.
And if you're wondering why you should listen to us, people you probably don't know, talk about music, it's because we are a band in Brooklyn, New York. We play shows all around New York City. We just got done with our second off-Broadway show, and we've been playing music between us for many, many years.
I thought it was because we were Depeche Mode.
Oh, they're also that.
Talking about ourselves.
It's supposed to be a secret.
Sorry.
I'll edit that part out. It's fine. Yeah, so we like to think that we know a little bit about music. We have been studying it and playing it for many, many years in our lives.
Yeah.
And we are very excited to share our enthusiasm of music with anyone that decides to listen. Hopefully you enjoy it. If not, that's okay. That's okay. We'll just go cry in a corner later.
We will cry.
Yeah, go tell us in the comments how much you hate us, and then we'll go read them and cry. But yeah, so we're going to talk about Depeche Mode.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm really excited for it.
Me too. Let's do it.
So I want to say before we really get into it, how I guess the idea for doing the Depeche podcast came about.
Yeah.
Because I want to say, so I always knew of Depeche Mode, my whole life.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was born in '94, so by the time I was born, they were already a big band.
Huge, yeah.
Huge. So growing up, hearing music, I always knew certain songs from them.
Yeah.
And I always kind of had an idea of who they were. But I wasn't a huge super fan. Mm-hmm. But my girlfriend loves them.
Yes.
So pretty recently, they were playing a show in New York that was right around her birthday. So I'm let me be the greatest boyfriend ever and get tickets, blah, 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 blah. And I was okay, I'm going to have fun at the show. I know they're great, but I was really more excited to do it for her.
Yeah.
But then we get there and the show happens and it was amazing.
Of course.
I was completely blown away by how good the show was. It's one of those things, I became such a bigger fan of them after seeing them live. And I think that's one of the greatest compliments you can give, a musician or really a performer of any kind.
Yeah. And in talking about them through research, one of the things that was said was they were just amazing live. And then the first person that signed them said that. Once I saw them live, they were just great. I mean, I pretty much cut my teeth on Depeche Mode because it's growing up, people were playing the Violator album everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody was blasting. Every type of person was blasting Enjoy the Silence or Personal Jesus. So, yeah. So when you brought the idea of doing a Depeche Mode podcast, I said, why not? My sister's a huge fan. I would say she introduced me to Depeche Mode. So,
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, cool. Because I was going to ask what your perception of them was before doing research for the podcast and if it's changed at all after this.
No, I just know more about them. They were never my band, my favorite band, but I did enjoy a lot of music from them, and I do like them and recognize, respect, and love their place in the world. And they've been on many lists of bands that have changed the world, and I can definitely
100%.
agree.
Oh, yeah. The influence that they've had on music, I would say modern music, especially electronic dance music, is insane.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll get into it a little more because we want to get into the history of the band soon, but I do want to say I go to a lot of different kinds of shows. I go to rock shows, rap shows, EDM shows, and it's after seeing them live, I'm these guys were doing everything that big EDM DJs have been doing since the 80s.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Without getting ahead of ourselves, I feel they're where everybody wanted Joy Division with Ian to go, and it's
shout out to Joy Division.
Yeah, Ian dying around the time that Depeche started coming out. I feel that kind of passed the torch in a way.
Interesting. I honestly didn't really think about that.
Singer-wise.
Yeah.
Singer and sound combined.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that more. But so let's get into the actual history of Depeche Mode. So they were formed in Basildon, England.
A post-war town. They made that town after the war. And it had a lot of high crime there after a while.
Which war? English Civil War?
Yes. Actually.
That I actually didn't know that.
Let me stop. No, but yeah, after the World War, they made that town. They kind of did it with Rockland County here. It's a town where pretty much we moved all the soldiers that came back home. They wanted to start some families and stuff like that.
That
put
makes
them
sense.
in blah 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 town.
Because it's like 26 miles away from London, is
Yes.
what I heard. 26 miles east.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a working class area.
Correct. Exactly.
And because what I've heard of is like I actually saw an interview with them of like lately, like a year or two ago, where he was wearing like these super like red like flamboyant boots, and he was on they were on an interview with Ricky Gervais, and he was like making fun of him. He's like, "Oh, that goes over really well in Essex, huh?" Because Essex is the state that Basildon is or whatever. And then I saw Martin Gore, who is a member of the band. We'll talk about the band members later. He was saying that he was like in a pub and he had his nails painted, as is like it's not really super uncommon now.
Yeah.
And he kind of like forgot where he was.
Yeah.
And some dude was just like, "Oi, the fuck is on your fingers?" And he's kind of like, "Oh yeah, I guess that's not really cool here."
Yeah.
Like it's just not really like the vibe, I guess, of where they're from.
You would get jumped in Basildon. Basildon.
Yeah. Basil.
I'm saying Basil because I'm American. I'm sorry, but it is Basildon. That's the way they pronounce it.
Oh, well, whatever. We're Americans. We can say whatever we want. You're not going to stop us. Red, white, and blue.
Freedom.
But, yeah, okay. So they were formed in Basildon, and it was 3 people at first. So it was Vince Clarke, who was the main songwriter.
Yes.
And then Andy Fletcher.
Yeah. And then, oh no, I was just going with
sorry.
you. I was going along with you.
And Martin.
I was being your backup.
And Martin Gore.
Martin Gore.
Martin Gore.
And a guy that you may know by the name of Dave. Get him.
God. Yes. So originally it was them 3, and they actually started off as a pretty typical like guitar band.
Yeah.
The way that Dave, the lead singer, got into the band was they saw him performing a cover of Heroes by David Bowie. And I guess even back then he had, some kind of crazy stage presence.
Yeah.
Because, going back to the concert, that was one of the things that really blew me away. Still to this day, I mean, they're in their 60s now. He was doing twirls and just spinning all over the stage.
That is part
insane.
of it. Yeah, we're going to really talk in depth about it, but that is part of their pop success.
Yes.
Combined with their sound, is somebody that can move around and dance like that and also look so wholesome in the face. So the music is serious and kind of depressed in a way, but he is having a great time.
Right.
So you're definitely going to be connected to Dave as the lead singer. Yeah, they needed somebody who could dance around and move because they were trapped by the instruments, the other members of the band in a way.
Right, because they started working with synthesizers instead of guitars, and so they had like a drum machine, and then they were just all like behind the synthesizers, and like kind of like in a box. You know what I mean? And then Dave comes out, swirling, doing all kind of crazy
all
things
over the place.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And it's funny though, because they did, the Depeche that we think of, it is kind of, like moody and like dark.
Yeah.
But it didn't necessarily start like that.
No.
Because the first album, because Vince was the main songwriter.
Yeah.
In the first album, it was pretty poppy. I mean, they started as a pop band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so I want to say a few more things. I have some notes because there's a lot of things that I want to make sure that I got about this. So first of all, their original band name was what?
The composition of sound.
That's not pretentious at all. But after they got Dave, he was like, "Hey, let's change it to Depeche Mode."
Yeah.
Based on some like French magazine he was reading.
Yeah, fashion magazine.
So they were playing at a place called the Crocs Club. I made a note of this for some reason. I thought this was really important at the time. I guess this was like one of the few places that was really playing like this kind of electronic music.
Yeah.
It was like, and they ended up becoming like the headliners at this club.
Yeah, they really had a crocodile there.
Yeah, well, it was the Crocs Club, so they actually had a few. All right, let's put this on the record, okay?
Men of their word, okay? Rare.
But they were playing there, and a dude who was a member of Some Bizarro Record, that was the name of the record label, saw them and approached them to make a song for their compilation album they were making. And that became their first recording, which was Photographic. Okay, and so this is the thing. So again, these early songs were written by Vince Clarke, and they were very poppy, right? They're very poppy, and they sounded very happy. They were kind of like light for the most part, very dancey.
Yeah.
The first album was more or less a dance record.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing that's really interesting about it, and I even have I wrote down quotes from these guys. Like I got a lot of notes on this. So synth was not a super popular instrument for like rock and pop music at the time, because like pretty much everything was based on guitars.
Yeah.
I mean, people used synths before. Like I know like The Who used synths like in the early 70s. Like other people, experimental artists, progressive rock artists used a lot of synths before.
Yeah, but they weren't forming their band around the synth.
Right. It wasn't like the instrument.
Yeah.
Like the guitar was pretty much
the main instrument. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. Is that who said this? So they're someone that signed them, Daniel Miller. He said, "I felt they were the first pop group to use synths as the main instrument."
Yeah.
Which is really a huge deal when you think of what music is like today. Like the synth is most of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And these were like the first guys who were like, this is everything. I mean, they didn't even have, we'll talk about this more obviously later, but they didn't even have any guitars on their records until like 4 albums in.
Yeah, until a few albums in. People were even making articles about the death of the guitar. First of all, how dare you?
How dare you?
But, you know, you're just trying to sell copies.
My guitars would argue differently.
Exactly. They're very much alive here at Sad Studios.
That's right. But the first album was called Speak and Spell.
Yes.
And this is, you know, it's honestly, it's really interesting because of the way that it goes down. So Vince only was with them for that one album.
Yeah. Vince, they were getting pretty good success. They were shopping their album around with a 1/4-inch tape, like a reel-to-reel, you know, so you would have to actually put it up and listen to it. So people were like, I don't want to listen to this. Like, you know, you have to actually fix a machine.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, so one person decided to listen to them, and they started getting on their way. But Vince didn't really like the direction that the band was going in, which is weird. These guys were shopping around their music. They were finally getting heard. They were feeling the easiness of actually just taking a small synth, moving it around, not having to lug around big instruments to go and shop and play for
Especially
people.
the drums.
Yeah, they were really into that. And then all of a sudden, Vince starts hating. He pulls a Ricky Bobby's dad. That's what he did.
You ain't first, you're last.
Exactly. He's like, things are going pretty well here.
So I'm out.
I'm out. It's going nice.
Well, so he left, and that's a really big deal in the band, because it's almost like I almost think of the first album as like it's almost like pre-Depeche Mode in a way.
Yeah.
Because after he leaves, Martin Gore becomes the main songwriter.
Yeah.
And his songs are a lot heavier. Like they have he's a lot moodier, a lot more like introspective themes as opposed to like the more pop music of the first album. In the first album, one of the most, I mean, the best example of this early Depeche style and the most famous example would be the song "Just Can't Get Enough."
I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough.
Yeah.
Do. Like, you know, it sounds happy. The words aren't super deep. It's like, you know, like a pretty superficial love song, more or less.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's very, very childlike. And yeah, their producer, Daniel Miller, he appointed kind of Martin to write in the songs. Martin was a songwriter before, but Vince was the main songwriter. And they said that when Vince decides to leave, Daniel's like, it's going to be all right. Everything's going to be okay.
Everything's fine.
Martin's going to write the songs. You know?
Just like, okay.
Okay. And then that's just how it goes.
And I have some interesting quotes from Martin from around this time. He said, to us, the synth was a punk instrument because it was fairly new and its potential was limitless. It really gave us a chance to explore, which I think is really interesting because, again, like at the time, guitars are the thing.
Yeah.
Right? So, but they're seeing this other instrument that's relatively new, and they're like, wait a minute, we can do so much with this. Like, we don't have to do what these other guitar bands are doing. You know what I mean? We can do a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say that we've got nothing against guitars, but it's so much easier with the synth. You have to be pretty good to use the guitar. Oh, wait, sorry, that was Andy Fletcher that said that. Andy Fletcher said that, which from now on, I'll just call him Fletch. Okay? But Fletch said that, and, like, that is, when you think of, like, what punk music is, that is like that's a great example of it. Because punk music is like, you don't need to know how to play your instruments.
Right.
And it is a lot easier to just take a keyboard and be like, do,
yeah.
than to learn how to play even basic guitar stuff.
Yeah, guitar is very physical. You're matching your brain with your ability to move your fingers, you know, very, very quickly. Where with a synth, you can get a really loud, full sound with just hitting one key.
Yeah, and you don't have to have as good of like even like playing guitar, like you have to have your fingers a certain way so that, you know, the fret so that it rings out, so that you don't block the other strings. But with the synth, anyone can go like this,
and
dude.
Yeah, and keep tapping it.
Yeah.
But to keep that sound on the guitar, it's like an actual physical thing that can hurt after a while.
Yeah, and you get carpal tunnel syndrome, and it's nobody likes that. So they keep working on their sound after Vince leaves. The second album is called A Broken Frame, and this is where, in my head, this is where like it really like the progression of Depeche Mode begins, because looking back at it now, you can kind of tell the songs are getting a little more complex as far as the arrangements and stuff, but like lyrically, you know, I feel like they didn't really find exactly what they were going to be yet, because this was the first album where Martin was writing all the songs.
Yeah.
So they had different things to figure out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's beautiful about this new Depeche Mode coming together after Vincent Clarke leaves, Vincent Clarke had a very good career after he left the band, which is like lightning struck twice for him for some reason.
Yeah, good for him.
Good for him.
He must be a good guy.
Yeah. And with Daniel Miller, when they met him, they did a verbal contract with him. They just felt his vibes and like actually trusted him. It was trust.
Hey, you won't fuck us over, right?
You know.
No.
No, I won't. Okay, we like you.
Okay, you're in.
Yeah, so that's really, really interesting to go through a first album and then another series of albums with the same guy. I'm sure they brought out the actual writing after a while. It's like, okay,
hey,
somebody's got to tell who gets paid when.
We need to figure out the royalties and the residuals. Yeah.
Yeah, but initially that's crazy.
I do also want to say Alan Wilder joined the band.
Yes.
After Vince left, because they needed more people on the stage to help them with the sound. Because again, the sound is getting more complex. They couldn't just do it with 3 people.
Right, and Alan Wilder is magnificent. Like you can tell when he joined. No offense to Vince, but Alan was clearly classically trained.
Yes.
And you can hear him Mozart in that shit.
Yes.
In the second album.
I like Mozart as a verb. That's good. That's actually the thing that's interesting is the second album, he wasn't actually on that album yet because he had just been like joined or whatever.
Yeah.
So he didn't actually start like he wasn't an official member until the third album.
Yes, they didn't put his name on the second album, but he did play on it.
And that's Construction Time Again is the third album. And I had to write all these out because they had like 15 albums, guys.
So many.
They have a lot of albums.
They have 17 top 10 albums. That is insane.
Yeah, I mean, is that top? That's top in UK?
No.
In America?
Top
or singles?
Top 10 albums, like worldwide.
Oh, shit. That's amazing. Okay.
They're wild.
And then, so the third album, so they're continuing to like really get deeper. And I feel like listening to the albums progress, like every album, there's so much more depth to it.
Yes.
You know?
It's true. Like you can, if you swallow them from the beginning, you really watch this band literally grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, well, like we were saying, like the beginning, like they're, not only are they very young, but the music is simpler. It's like one note at a time on the synth, but there's just different layers of it. There's not as many tracks. It's pretty basic, relatively. And you would just listen to the first album now, it does sound a bit dated, I'm not going to lie.
It does, very dated to me.
And, you know, some of it has to do with, you know, where they were at as musicians and also with the recording equipment at the time. And, you know, there's nothing they can really do about that. But it is what it is. But I have a quote from some music critic at the time that really sums this up really well around the time of the third album. They said the lyrics have matured from wide-eyed fun to wide-eyed frustration.
Ooh.
Which is a great way to say that.
I mean, we literally heard Dave's voice change, you know, and him start to sustain more notes. It's like you wanted him to do that. Yeah. You know, and he did it for us, and that's great.
And I also want to shout out his voice for just like the strong baritone of it. It's just a great, very rich voice. He's not like a screamer. He's not a Robert Plant type. Like, he's not going to soar over the track. Yeah. He's going to be right down in the middle of the track, like where all the instruments are. And that has a certain very distinct quality to it. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we got to shout that out. So at this point, they're just getting bigger and bigger. They're touring UK, they're touring Europe. Yep. By '84, this is only 4 years after they started. Yeah. They played a show with Elton John to 50,000 people.
Insane.
And this was in, I'm going to fuck this up, Ludwigshafen, Germany. Tell me, any Ludwigshafeners.
Shout out to you guys.
Shout out to you. Tell me if I said that right. I definitely didn't. But yeah, they keep putting out songs. They keep putting out singles. They got some of their songs they're putting out. I didn't even realize when I went to the show how many songs they had. Because now, I mean, there's already songs they put out. But this one, they got like People Are People. Master and Service. Master and Servant. Blasphemous Rumors. Which are great songs. Yeah. On this third album. Oh, yeah. And then they just keep putting out like an album every year at this point.
Yeah, they're getting a little frustrated with daytime radio because nighttime radio is playing them, obviously. But daytime is like, no, you know, so that's their only battle. But their popularity is really increasing.
Yeah. So then in '84, they put out the fourth album, Some Great Reward. And again, like you kind of had to listen to the full albums because as you could really hear it, just the sound getting deeper and deeper. It's going from single note synth lines to like now there's a lot of chords. Now there might be more different like pianos or certain type of drums. Now they're starting to get into sampling.
Yep.
So the sound is just expanding and just getting larger and larger and larger with every album pretty consistently.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, even to this day.
Yes.
And they just put out an album this year.
It's insane.
Yeah, but we'll continue talking about other things. This is another quote. This is a quote from Fletch from 85 that I think is great of showing kind of his mindset because apparently he was the most like level-headed out of like the core group. And he said in 85, "We've still got a long way to go before people will be proud to have a Depeche Mode album in their collection."
Which is a great, honest thing to say.
Right.
Because when you go back and research the music, he's being very truthful there compared to the music of today or at their peak success.
Right.
After 3 albums, though, they parted ways with Daniel Miller. Not in a bad way, but
The
it's
producer,
just yeah. They were on Mute Records. Maybe you've heard of Mute Records. Maybe.
I don't hear anything from Mute Records.
But Mute Records was getting huge as an indie label, and Daniel was getting busy. So he didn't have enough work. He didn't have enough time to put in hours and hours with Depeche Mode like he necessarily wanted to.
Yeah.
So they agreeably decided to part ways.
And let's take this time to say that they were putting lots of hours in. I mean, they were sometimes spending days just to get like one synth sequence correct because they were like really in the trenches with their. Because I think Martin in particular was like really up to date with like all the newest musical technology, with like sequencers and samples and all this stuff, and just like really getting into like every single tone of like every possible thing that they could.
Yeah.
So as your producer, like this is not like you can't be producing multiple bands at the same time if you're
Correct.
producing for Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
That's just not how it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, so they had to move on from it. But it, you know, it's all good. It's not like there wasn't any hard feelings or anything.
No, not at all. It's just like, hey, man, got to make more money. Hey, man, us too.
Yeah.
You go do that.
86, fifth album, Black Celebration.
Let's have a black celebration.
Again, the music is getting a lot moodier.
Yeah.
The sound is getting bigger every time.
Yeah, they have David Bascombe in as a producer now. Very renowned. I want to say, I just had to say that certain songs from this era, like Behind the Wheel, was really good. And David Bascombe, they really liked him because he had been producing Tears for Fears. And if you listen to Tears for Fears, you can hear a similar sound.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, for sure. But I just think it's really interesting how I feel like a lot of the other bands in the 80s around this time, I feel like a lot of bands would use synthesizers, but they would be as more of like just like a sprinkle on top.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think in my head right now I'm thinking of like The Cure. Like The Cure, they would use synths, you know, for some melody lines and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's drums, guitar, and bass.
Yeah.
And they would have synth as a feature.
Yeah.
And again, the thing that made Depeche so different was that the synth was everything for them. They
was
built everything off the synth. You know what I mean? So that's really important. But the synth, sorry, I was about to say synth album. The 6th album, they decide maybe we could bring in some guitars. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So even the name of the album is really kind of funny when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
Because they literally call it music for the masses.
Yes. I love this era because they said that they were listening to a lot of Philip Glass.
Interesting.
Alan Wilder was. So they wanted a minimalist kind of sound along with that heavy synthesizer influence.
Right.
And you can kind of hear it. You can kind of hear the art in the music starting to creep in.
Absolutely. And this is, I got to shout out Never Let Me Down Again. Is on this album. One of their classics. I feel like this album starts like the classic Depeche period.
Yeah.
Because at this point, you know, they've been touring UK and Europe. They've done some North American stuff, but now they're starting to explode.
Yeah.
You know, and they literally, so they get ready for their world tour, like their first like big world tour.
Yes.
The Music for the Masses tour.
Yeah.
Which starts off in 88, and the last stop is at the Pasadena Rose Bowl. In front of 75,000 people.
They're not going to fill that up. They can't do it. I don't think they can.
I think Depeche might do it.
Really?
They
Depeche
might do
Mode.
it.
Who listens to them?
But it's so crazy because they were, again, so this is 88. So this is 8 years in.
Uh-huh.
And 8 years ago, you were just playing these tiny little clubs in Basildon. And now you're selling out the Pasadena Rose Bowl.
Insane.
In America.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. But I also want to say, I didn't write down who made this quote. But somebody was saying the thing that was so crazy about that concert, it was like, they had played big shows before, but it was like, supporting other people or like, being part of a bigger show.
Yes.
This was 75,000 Depeche Mode fans. These were not here for other people, and Depeche Mode's also there. All those people were also there for Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, insane. And the marketing really helped with it because they had people do the covers for their albums. They didn't draw them themselves or anything like that. Their first album, they spent like $1,000 on that cover with the bird and the nest, and they absolutely hated it. They were just like, this is just crazy. And for the Music for the Masses album, they actually built huge megaphones. And they actually stood them up over whatever town that is, I forgot. But it's actually it's over a river, over a bay. And then they decided to get a map and take pictures of different locations and put the megaphones on top of those locations on maps. So it made you feel like the megaphone was being taken to these different places, kind of like a Pink Floyd-ish thing with the pig kind of thing.
Like the music is being brought to the masses.
Yeah, so like the marketing really helped that as well.
Well, they definitely had a very distinct visual style at the time, too.
It's so interesting when it goes into album covers, though. When you look at it, it does look like a great piece of art, the Music for the Masses album.
Yeah.
Cover, but it also looks like you just took two megaphones and colored them and just put. I didn't know it was a whole production, like a hugely built one that had to be mounted up and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I also want to say, as far as like visuals, like they had a very distinct like visual style at the time, and people kind of like wrote them off as being just like a bullshit kind of band because of how they looked. Yeah. But when you really get into it, they had the songs. Like no one could take that away from them, and it's like we were saying, like. The songs kept getting bigger and there was more depth to them. They kept getting more emotional and kind of moody. But the thing that really makes them stand out to me when I think about that is that it was very electronic, but it was also so like human. There was also a lot of soul to it.
That's the beauty of Depeche Mode. I think that's what it is. It's like, especially like Dave as a frontman, right? Like his face, his attitude does not have to match his sound. And that's so amazing because at any given point, you can see these guys in an interview and they're going to be laughing and smiling. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? They're going to have on hardcore leather. Do you like my cosplay today, by the way, guys? They're going to have hardcore leather, glasses, hair gelled back and stuff like that. Totally looking unapproachable. But as soon as they open their mouth, as soon as you see them, they're like...
Yeah, they're fun guys.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. That's what I think drew the masses into them.
Yeah. Well, it's that, and then I just think it's so interesting and like... how they can have like such electronic like, and as time goes on it becomes even more like industrial too, like industrial music influences, but like it's so human, and I think a lot of that I think it's two parts. I think it's a lot to do with Martin's songwriting, and then so much to do with Dave's voice as well. Yeah. Because when you're just using synths and like samples for everything, it's real easy. It can become like kind of cold and robotic, but with them it just never did. Right. And I think that's a huge reason why people are able to connect with it, too, because it never felt like it's just some robotic production. It always felt like these are real guys making real music just with new technology. Yeah. Yeah, yep. So I want to shout out that as well. Oh, yeah. The Rose Bowl concert was filmed for a documentary, Depeche Mode 101. And then... now they're really in, again, I consider this to be like their peak era.
Yeah, the promo for that 101 was crazy. They literally put out a casting call to kids in America. You had to be over 18, and they were going to put you in a van or a trailer and take you across country just listening to Depeche Mode, just having a great time. That must have been epic for kids that age.
Yeah, I bet.
What
a great time. So the next single that they put out from the album that they were working on was called Personal Jesus.
Reach out, touch faith.
You may have heard it.
This is probably the first Depeche song that I ever heard.
Yeah.
I mean, that song is on all kinds of radio stations.
Oh, yeah.
Johnny Cash covered it.
Yes, he did, and that's their favorite cover of their song.
I bet. But it's like now they're clearly coming into their own because all of these elements are combining. Because now there is guitar in it. Do 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 do. So they're not taking anything out of the sound to add guitar. They're just adding things. They're just mixing up the pot. You know. So now it's like they're dance, they're alt rock, they're indie rock, they're electronic. They're all these things all at the same time, and it's crazy. And nobody sounds like that.
Yeah, and now they're becoming huge in America. We were just making a joke before we did the podcast that you got to bring the guitars back for the Americans.
You know us Americans, we like a nice guitar, okay?
Like nice guitar.
It's actually pronounced guitar.
Exactly.
But Personal Jesus became the biggest selling 12-inch single in Warner Brothers history.
Which is insane. On the Violator album.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Violator, the 7th album, came out in 1990.
Yeah. That's their favorite album, too. Like, they did an interview. Everybody involved with the Violator album or with the Depeche Mode, they asked them, like, what's their favorite album of all time in Depeche Mode. And all you heard was, oh, it's got to be the Violator. Oh, the Violator. Yeah, Violator.
Yeah.
That was huge.
It's huge commercially and then just artistically. It's a great statement.
Yes.
Because it's like I said, they're like mixing all of those things. Because they've had this time as like the synth pop band. They've started adding in all these other elements. They have the guitars. They've added like strings sometimes. They've added different kinds of percussion. Just like everything that they can to make their sound the way that they want it to be. They're not afraid to go for anything.
Yeah.
They're not putting themselves in a box.
Yeah.
You know, which is extremely important for any artist. Like if you think, oh, this is what our genre is, then you're kind of already fucking yourself over.
Yeah.
And I feel like they never did that.
No, I don't think so either. I love Personal Jesus, but personally, my favorite one on that album is Enjoy the Silence.
That's such a beautiful song.
Oh man, I can almost remember the first time I heard it and like the effect on me. It was very little, and it's funny, the concept for the video. Speaking of artistic concept, they didn't know what to do with the video, and the guy who had the concept for the video is like, in my mind, I have a king with a deck chair.
They're like, whoa.
They're like, what?
Whoa.
They're like, this is ridiculous.
But it works.
But it worked.
Yeah. And that's such a beautiful song. Like that's so interesting because some of the earlier songs, when they are synth based, I couldn't really imagine them as just like any other kind of way.
Yeah.
Like as like an acoustic ballad or like a piano ballad.
And that one was supposed to be one.
Exactly. Like this, now they're at the point where these songs, they use electronic instrumentation, but these are just beautiful songs that could be transposed into any style.
True.
Like you could play this guitar, or you could play this song with an acoustic guitar and just a piano, and it would be a beautiful song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So they're really just, well, Martin particularly, with the songwriting, is just really hitting a different level.
Daniel was right. It's okay. Martin's going to write the songs.
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Just let him do it. I can tell. But I also this was a funny thing that I wrote this down. They did an album signing in Beverly Hills. 10,000 fans came to this album signing. It shut down traffic in LA.
Yes.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
That's some Beatlemania type shit.
Yeah, they were happy for that because that was the promotion for the album, and they said that they were supposed to be there for like 4 hours, and they honestly only got like 4 autographs done, and then everybody started acting all wild, so they had to go home. So
Security
they were like,
couldn't stop it.
Yeah, they were like, that was the best day for us. We didn't have to do too much. We were just there for a little bit.
Day of work.
And then you get home and you get on the news, and then they were the biggest thing on the news because of all of what happened in Beverly Hills.
Oh, okay. Well,
they're like, there's a promotion right there.
Hey, free promo. I'll shout out a few songs on this album. Policy of Truth. You already shouted out Enjoy the Silence.
Love it.
And World in My Eyes.
Let me show you the world in my eyes.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many songs. Like that's what I'm saying. Like the thing that also blew me away when I went to see them in concert was how many songs they had and how they were all great. And they were all stuck in my head. Like for weeks afterwards.
I believe it.
You know what I mean? So that also blew me away.
How cool.
And more proof that around this time they're really just getting on another level. In 91, Martin was honored by ASCAP, which is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, for Policy of Truth and Enjoy the Silence, because they were so huge at the time. Like, even the Association of Music Writers is like, you did something here.
Who sings this?
Yep. You guys, you got it. You did it. You know what I mean? I just think that's crazy.
Yeah. Because you think about whoever the head of that department is. I mean, I don't want to say they're not in touch with music, but, like, you know what I'm saying. They got corporate things to do all day.
Yeah, they're not thinking about that all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they put out that album, obviously huge. They're touring. They're playing more shows. They eventually regroup to work on a new album which comes out in 93,
Yeah.
Songs of Faith and Devotion.
Yeah, where they're being heavily influenced by distorted guitars and the grunge sound that's coming out. So,
But again, so they never really, they did change their sound, but they never changed who they were, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
just took things that were happening and just added it into the blender.
which is great, and not in a fake way, right? Because you hate to see your artist just flip the script on you, like all of a sudden, like your artist who probably wouldn't have been a hipster is all of a sudden a hipster or something like that. And you're just
Well,
like,
that's what the kids are doing.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. No, it always felt like they just, as artists, they just wanted to expand.
Yes.
They're not like, oh, well, that's what's selling, so we should do that.
Correct.
You never get that vibe from them. It always feels very heartfelt. And again, that's why I think people connect to it so much, because even with this, electronic music, there is still that heart,
Yeah,
you know?
I agree.
So obviously that's a huge album. I have a quote here from Martin. Right now, there's a lot of dance tracks out there, and I think everyone expected us to put out a dance album. I think subconsciously I tried to rebel against that. Which, again, is great, because basically, this is how I interpret that quote, and maybe it's a little egotistical on their, my thinking of them. But I feel like at this point, people have kind of caught up to what they were doing, as far as, the synth dance kind of stuff, and that,
Interesting.
it was that was a way more prevalent sound now.
Yeah,
So they're like, well, we're not just going to keep doing that. We've done this.
yeah.
We have to do other things. Let's add more guitars. Let's make it a little grungier. Let's make it a little dirtier.
Yeah, I can honestly say that I agree with that, because they birthed a group that I really love, Ladytron, and Ladytron is all synths. Okay,
Yeah.
you go to the concert, it's just 4 or 5 synths there, and they're just dude, and they're singing, but there's no front man dancing or anything like that. But I know they were born out of Depeche Mode.
Hell yeah. Another song I want to shout out on this one is "Walking in My Shoes."
You stumble in my footsteps.
Great song.
It's so crazy when you mention the songs, you can hear him singing the chorus right away.
I know.
He's in my
Walking
right ear.
in my shoes, stumbled in my footsteps. So they keep touring. In 95, Alan leaves the band.
Yes, Alan is gone.
And I have a quote from him, because I got quotes galore. I came prepared today, let me tell you that. He said, I decided to leave during the making of that album, which would end up becoming 1997's Ultra.
Yes.
He said, I decided to leave during the making of that album. I remember 1 or 2 occasions where I thought, this is just not enjoyable. This is the last time I want to be in this situation.
The album is more digital than anything, and I would say if that is a time to go, that would be the time to go.
Well, that, and then there's also a lot more, there's a lot of personal things happening in the band now.
Yeah.
Because now I don't want to say they're falling into the rock star traps, but there is a little bit of, Dave's getting into drugs.
Yes.
Martin's getting into alcohol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Things aren't as happy and, connected within the band as they were on the come up now that they've hit that level.
That level, the stress of having to maintain, maybe nobody's telling you per se, but you could be telling yourself that, Martin said he was drinking from the time they got into the studio until the time they left. Some good music was probably really written.
And probably after.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Got to keep
and probably
up.
before.
Gotta keep up.
It doesn't stop.
But, man,
But
oh,
no,
man.
but it gets serious though, because in '96 Dave ODs.
And he dies for 2 minutes.
He does. Sorry, the way you said that, I was like, wait, don't just say that. But no, he did actually die for 2 minutes. He OD'd in LA on heroin, I think.
Yes, definitely heroin.
Yeah.
Died
and
for 2 minutes and came back.
Yeah, he was literally dead. So that's clearly things within the band are not
Not going
functioning as well as they could be.
well. Yeah, and I believe he got in trouble a little bit with the law or something like that. He did have a problem.
He did, but he completed a rehab program and his record was expunged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
INS and immigration, they'll straighten you up real quick.
Yeah.
If you're not from here and you're causing trouble, it's
you don't have a lot of choice.
I might not be able to come back here.
I still want to play stadiums in America.
It's wait a minute.
I don't love heroin that much.
Yeah, it's pretty sunny and nice. We got some great views over here.
Depending on where you are.
True.
If you're in New York, not so much.
No, it's very gothic here. Very much like where you're from. Very much like England.
But they keep working. Mm-hmm. They keep working on music, even though Alan's gone.
Yeah.
Even though Dave almost died. Well, did die, but not permanently.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He was
I don't think I've ever said that sentence before.
He got a first-class ticket to the resurrection.
Yes, he came back and he was now a Cuban man.
Mm-hmm.
Just kidding, guys. That was a Scarface joke. Okay, so Yeah, so the ninth album is Ultra in 1997. They performed live for the first time in 3 years.
Yes.
After Alan left, and I guess after the last tour, Alan left. All this stuff happened with Dave. They didn't tour at all.
Yeah.
Which is pretty crazy to go from playing all over the world, like during the like Music for the Masses tour and like Violator tour, they were playing like hundreds of shows in hundreds of countries for millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go from that to only a few years later not playing a single show for 3 years.
Right.
That's pretty
wild.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but it must have been a good rest break for them. They probably just needed a nap. We said that about the Eagles. Just need a nap.
They just need a nap.
3 years, who knows?
Yeah. Same shit. Let's see. So in 98 they put out a compilation album of their singles from 86 to 96. Did more tours.
Oh yeah.
Played the former USSR for the first time.
Which is cool. Back in the USSR. Wrong artist.
What? That's not Depeche Mode? It's the Beatles. In 2000, it was their 20-year anniversary, which was crazy when I read that because I'm like, oh, that means their 40-year anniversary happened only a couple years ago.
Yeah. Wild.
I guess they're at 43 years now.
Yeah. They are doing their
About
thing.
to be 44.
Yeah, and they're just constantly hitting number ones. Like, I was just going through them. It's weird now with streaming and stuff like that, you know. And it used to think of it as no big deal when somebody went platinum, but they actually sold 1 million hard copies of their album to 1 million people here in the U.S. alone, which is kind of wild for now. I mean, people barely break the 100,000s in terms of hard copy sales, and it's like 1 million people went out and were like, "I need that in my house."
Needed it.
Yeah, which is crazy. And they're getting kind of like 50-50 reviews. They're still hitting number one, but like magazines like Rolling Stone are thinking like they're the best and this is great and this is number one. But all those kind of like smaller magazines that, you know, kind of started out with them are saying like, oh, this is okay. It's kind of too mainstream. But that's expected.
Definitely after Alan left, the reviews were not as positive.
Right.
Which makes sense because, again, he was classically trained guy, and you definitely could tell with him not being there, but it's not like the music isn't so great.
Right.
But there is obviously an element that he had that they can't do exactly without him.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So 2001, 10th album, Exciter. I love the single word titles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, it's right to the punch, right to the point.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for them. 2005, 11th album, Playing the Angel. I just said, well, I can't even talk today. This was actually the first album to have songs written by Dave.
Yes.
Which I think is really interesting because he's singing all these songs with all of his heart and all of his emotion. None of these words were his.
Right.
Which I think is a whole nother talent in itself, to be able to like have these words, like I'm Martin, you're Dave. I'm like, here's this song I wrote. And he has to really embody the song and like put himself in that mindset to really make these songs come to life when he had nothing to do with the writing of it.
I think that's the beauty of some artists. Like, I love to hear about a band where there's no infighting about who gets to do what. Like, you do what you do best. You know what I'm saying? Dave sings really, really well. He's the front man. He brings in and he had a lot of connects in the beginning, too, and that's what really got them on the go. But he's not necessarily the songwriter. You know what I'm saying? So if somebody writes the song for him, he's so happy to sing it. Like, the only other person I've really heard of that does stuff like that is, like, Roger Daltrey, where he's just like, just tell me exactly how you want me to do it, and I'll do it. And it's just like, that is amazing. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of beauty in, like, knowing your full gifts capacity and being able to take it to the most because you know that is what you do. You are the singer, like, you know?
Well, that's the whole thing about being in a band and is being able to use everybody's talents to equal out everybody else.
Yeah.
Because, well, I mean, part of the reason that he started writing songs, because he did put a solo album out, you know, after, or, you know, separate from Depeche.
Yeah.
But it's like, they knew during that time, it's like, Dave's got the voice, Martin's got the lyrics, and there wasn't really, like, the ego of it, of, like, Martin being like, well, no, I want to sing.
Right.
And he did sing some songs, but, you know, it wasn't, they weren't fighting about that.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, this is what's best for the music that we're making as a collective.
Oof, what a testament. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Love that.
So, you know, at this point, you know, they keep putting out albums, and I'm going to name all the albums, but it's like, they're already obviously clearly established. They've been around for, 25 years at this point. They've been huge. They've sold millions of records.
They still have to prove it to me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sold on this.
No, I just want to say that because I feel like, you know what I noticed when we do podcasts, like the come up is the most fun thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And then at some point, just like, yeah, they put out another album, it went platinum. They put another one, 2 times platinum, won a Grammy. Another one. Like, at some point, it's like, I'm not saying you take it for granted, but it's just like known. Like, at this point, yeah, they make great music. Mm-hmm. They're sticking around. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So let me see. So 2005, yeah, that was Playing the Angel. 2009, Sounds of the Universe. 2013, Delta Machine. 2017, Spirit. And 2023, Memento Mori.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like 6 weeks before they started recording that album, Fletch died of aortic dissection? Dissection? I don't really know what that means. Something with his aorta, obviously. But
I mean, did they cut it before and it ruptured, or did it just come apart itself? That's a really big.
Yeah, I don't.
Tube.
I don't know. All I know is that unfortunately he had passed away
At like 60. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they decided to just keep going. I mean, they decided they weren't going to stop. Then they were just going to continue on as a duo of Dave and Martin. Because at this point, like we've been doing this for 40 years. We're just going to add some other guy. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. And then you have to worry about like, oh, is the chemistry going to be the same? Like, how is this going to be different? Like, there's no way that you can just really do that. Like, I don't know. But they decided to keep going.
Yeah, because when Alan left. Right?
Yeah.
When Alan left, they were kind of like, they kind of gave him the vibe like he was never really part of the band, and he had been there for so many years. But the core that came from Basildon just kind of, I don't know, he always felt like he was a little bit on the outside.
Right.
Which is so interesting. I mean, it's like decades together. So, yeah, I can only imagine bringing somebody else in.
I do have another quote here from Martin around the time of 2005, which I think is a very good way of summing up kind of what I've been saying about like where the heart in their music is. And Martin Gore said, "I never see our music as over dark. There's always an element of hope, and I hope that comes out in our music."
It does.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it is because, you know, the music can be so dark and depressing, but there is always something in there that hooks you. There's some kind of positivity. There's some kind of like, it can get better. Like this is, you know, something people have to deal with. We're dealing with it, but there is another side to it. You know what I mean? And that's why there's just so many things that leading up to this band becoming how big they are, and why people love them so much to this day. And now, I mean, we're pretty much, you know, we said all their albums and stuff. Yeah. But like, okay, so Memento Mori came out in 2023, and that's the tour that I saw them on. So that's 43 years into them being a band is when I saw them, and I was still just completely blown away by how good they were.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's just, I don't know, it's insane. It's insane.
It is. What's your favorite part of the band? Like, what makes Depeche Mode for you? Like, what is it?
Well, obviously the synths, but the thing that I think my perception of it changed after seeing them, because there were certain things that Martin was playing on guitar at the show that I thought were synths in the recording. Okay. So now I think of it as just being able to take any sound from anything that they want and making it sound like Depeche Mode. You know, does that make sense? I don't know if that made sense the way that I said it. Yeah, because you thought it was a synth, but it can be replicated on another instrument, so that's... Yeah, but it's like they know what they want it to sound like, and they're going to figure out a way to do it regardless of what instrument it is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Whether it's a certain sample that they're looking for, if it's a certain patch on a keyboard, if it's a certain guitar effect... They will make whatever tone they want to exist. Yeah. That's what I realized after seeing them live. Oh, I didn't even mention something else besides, so they always had like a really strong ear for melody, and that's very obvious in all of their music. But even from the first album, their taste in vocal harmonies was really strong. Yeah. And that was another thing that really stood out to me when I saw them, is that their vocal harmonies were fantastic. New life. And Martin was doing most of the harmonies, and he would do like, sometimes he would harmonize like a full octave above where Dave was, because Dave would be low and Martin would be high, and it just makes the sound, again, sound so much more depth than if it was just Dave. Very cool. You know what I mean? So I guess that's my biggest takeaway after seeing them and listening to so many of their songs. And there were so many songs that I heard for the first time at the show that are now some of my favorite songs from them.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just really can't say enough about how great this band is. And clearly they're just so influential on so much music today. I mean, we were talking about it like a little bit earlier. Like so much music today, like pop music, is all based on the synthesizer.
Right.
And, you know, some people might like it, some people might not like it. I'm not here to comment on that. I'm just here to say that clearly Depeche Mode had a huge deal to being that, to that coming about.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really hard to understate that influence.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'm trying to say.
That is for sure. Yeah, I just love that the music can sound so dark and brooding, but they themselves are a big contrast to that. You know, I loved when he said like, there's always a little bit of hope and glitter. And that is what attracts the masses, because they can easily delve into being like really pissy guys, really dark,
just depressed and,
you know what I'm saying?
Upset all the time.
You know what I'm saying? Destroying stuff everywhere they go. I mean, we know bands like that. We love some bands like that. Okay,
some of them.
But I think that Depeche's music, it just sounds so dark sometimes, that their glimmer of hope that they weave in with their personalities and also with some of their lyrics is what makes them for me.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That, without that, then it wouldn't be, I don't know if it would be as fun to listen to.
No, I don't think I don't think it would be as huge or anything like that. I mean, a lot of their shows, nothing happens. They're like a little bits of riots and stuff like that, but like nothing really happens in those like mass like crazy rock and roll moments.
Right,
and it's like, you know, if they themselves had been darker people,
it could have got fucked up.
Yes.
Yeah,
you know?
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about it at the concert. I'm like, it was only positive energy.
Yeah.
Even though some of these songs are really dark and really depressing, like, it really felt like an uplifting thing to be at. And I want to say, I mean, this first set, okay, so they did one weekend in Brooklyn, which is when I saw them, and then the next weekend they were playing Manhattan. I was literally considering going to see them again. I didn't do it just because tickets are fucking expensive now.
Yeah.
But I was really considering it. That's how good they were. I don't know if I've ever said that about anyone else.
Right. Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, they're just legendary.
Mm-hmm.
And I love them. I think
too.
you guys love them if you're watching this, listening to this, or whatever.
Hey, tell us any things that we left out, right?
Yeah, tell us what we missed. Tell us what your favorite Depeche songs are. I'd really like to know because, I mean, I'm sure there's still some that I haven't heard. They have so many albums.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm really curious. Yeah, and then just tell us why you love Depeche Mode, I guess. We want to hear about it.
Oh, sure.
Let's have a conversation, guys.
I know. What shows did you go to? Some of you are like, you know, probably approaching like, I don't know, 50, 55 and stuff like that. You probably were teens at this time. Yeah, let us know because we know, you you guys are still with it.
Yeah. If you are watching us, that means you're cool. That means you.
It means you taught us how to be cool.
Hell yeah. So shout out to all of you for watching / listening. Shout out to Depeche Mode for bringing all this amazing music into our lives.
Oh, yeah.
And until next time, this has been Music Maniacs with Sight After Dark. We'll see you soon.
See ya.